practical issue number 2 in the name of Deputy Michael McNamara to the Minister for Health, regulation of small food businesses.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, small food businesses throughout Ireland have assumed a new importance at a time when the creation and maintenance of 1 or 2 jobs might be the difference between a family staying in Ireland and emigrating. That was, I think, recognised by the government. It was one of our first initiatives as a government, was to reduce the VAT that people pay in small food businesses throughout the country to enable them to be more competitive. And I think it was a relatively modest jobs proposal, but I think it has shown benefit already. We do have, albeit a small increase in employment and an increase that's not of the nature of the scale that we would want, but nevertheless this sector is one of the sectors which is providing an increased number of jobs. But the question I'd like to raise is, do we require the level of regulation, inspection and enforcement in respect of these small household family-run food businesses, or would a less strict regime be possible without compromising public health? There is now a trend across Europe towards simplifying legislation under the banner of smarter rules for safer food. Tony O'Burg, the EU Health and Consumer Policy Commissioner, earlier this month announced a legislative package which aims to prevent the spread of communicable animal-based diseases and foreign pests to European crops, and indeed to simplify the very large number of measures which exist in food safety in the European Union, a package which would cut down existing food safety laws from 70 as it currently exists, to 5 pieces of legislation to ease compliance. Well, in that regard, Minister, I would suggest that this government might look at existing legislation, both national legislation and legislation implementing EU legislation, to see whether perhaps a new SI, bringing all these together, codifying all these various strands of legislation which involves numerous state agencies, could be brought together. Because undoubtedly, there is a huge and overly, in my view, cumbersome demands placed on very small food businesses. I mean, there are farmers' markets throughout Ireland where people sell produce from their own kitchen. I mean, are they to be subjected to this level of registration? Surely, if there was a labelling mechanism where people could be told this is home-produced products, well, if it's home-produced, well, then you can't expect that it's going to have to be produced in compliance with the same standards that, for example, McDonald's, who operate across countries, continents, operate to. I mean, it's a question of labelling, and I think the European Commission are acknowledging that what we need is greater labelling, and there has to be an element of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. I'll give you one example, Minister. Close, and I see Deputy Dooley here in the chamber. It's a food business that Deputy Dooley would know because it's from the same part of the county that we're from. I'm not going to name it because it would be improper of me to do so. But there's a review on TripAdvisor saying that even from Caledonia, New York, even though busy when we arrived, we were given prompt, friendly service and very good, reasonably priced meal. February 2013 from Yuma, Arizona. I only had a small sampling of their food, but it was enough for me to go again if I'm ever in the area. Now, I know that particular business employs numerous students in East Clare, and it's a very valuable source of employment for those students.
To conclude, please.
Thanks. Fast forward a couple of months, and what we see is an order from the Health Service Executive under the EC Official Control of Foodstuffs Regulation 2010, SI number 117 of 2010, ordering that the vegetable store and the food store only be closed. And for the love of God, the food store, the fuel store rather, where the fuel is stored, being closed by the Health Service Executive. Have they nothing better to be doing? And has this government an intention to simplify the regulations that apply to such small businesses?
Call the Minister.
I must apologise for the Minister for Health is unable to take this question personally, and I'm taking it on behalf. I think Deputy McNamara has indicated Ireland's food sector and the success of that sector and how it has contributed so much, and in no small way, to our reputation as a provider of safe, high-quality food. This reputation has been copper-fastened by the speed of our reaction to recent incidents involving equine contamination of meat and dioxin contamination of pork products. It is important, therefore, for us to ensure that Irish products are checked regularly and any deficiencies addressed to ensure that Ireland maintains its reputation as a world-class provider of high-quality, safe food. The contribution of small and medium-sized enterprises is fundamental to the success of the Irish food industry. Over 90% of Irish food business operators fall into this category. With much of our food safety legislation developed at EU level, the Department of Health and Agricultural, Food and Marine at all times look to ensure that the needs of small and medium-sized companies are taken fully into account when discussing legislation at EU working group level. This has resulted in certain exemptions being set for smaller companies in such areas as labelling and food hygiene, and reduced regulatory requirements applying to a range of small businesses, including butchers and retail caterers. Detailed guidance notes for SMEs have also been developed and published by the Food Safety Authority of Ireland, covering such matters as the implementation of hazard analysis and critical control point principles. So, in line with the Government's aim to substantially reduce the administrative burden on SMEs, the Food Safety Authority of Ireland has also, as much as possible, introduced online facilities in respect of many of these services. The FSAI has developed guidance for agencies to reduce many cases where food businesses were supervised by more than one set of food safety inspectors. This cross-agency guidance has succeeded in clarifying supervision arrangements and reduced the regulatory burden directly. Finally, the FSAI has also developed a number of fora through which SMEs can provide feedback in relation to such issues as regulation, including the Food Service Forum, the Retail Forum and the Artisan Food Producers Forum. And perhaps this is an area or an opportunity for your individual case to be able to link in with these particular fora. Regulatory issues are discussed at these fora and the options for flexibility in meeting legal requirements are explored. It's also worth pointing out that Ireland does not charge the food industry for the cost of official controls, except where they're mandatory. However, I will bring the matters that Deputy McNamara has raised to the attention of the Minister for Health, but also to Minister of State Perry, who is in charge of small business and indeed the regulatory control.
Further 2 minutes for a supplementary statement.
I thank the Minister for his very positive and constructive reply. Undoubtedly good food, good hygiene and honest labelling are essential to consumer confidence, and indeed they need to be maintained. However, I think that the complexity of the legislation and the complexity of the reporting which is required from very small businesses needs to be looked at. I mean, quite close to home, somebody was making homemade brown bread, and they came out and they closed it down because the kitchen wasn't big enough, because it was just a kitchen in a home. But sure, I mean, if it's homemade brown bread, where do they think it's going to be made other than in a home? This is, I think it's a matter of labelling. I mean, if you're getting home-produced eggs, well, I remember as a child, when there were too many eggs on the farm in summer, they'd be brought in the local co-op and you could buy them there. But obviously we weren't subject to the same degree of regulation, or maybe we were indeed, and we acted unlawfully in selling off those extra eggs. But if we did, I don't really think we did anything wrong, and I do think that regulation is required, but maybe we can't go too far in strangling small businesses. We need to allow the food business, and particularly small kitchen enterprises, to develop.
Further 2 minutes to conclude.
I subscribe to the sentiments expressed by Deputy McNamara. It's a constant battle in order to reduce the regulatory approach that some of our agencies have in relation to small businesses, and particularly in the food area. It is sometimes difficult to explain, and I know the deputies in the House that from rural constituencies would share my view that it is often difficult to explain to particular small businesses why there are so many inspections that we carried out in the food area. But there is a price to be paid if we don't get things right in relation to food and hygiene, and we saw that in recent times. But the fora that I've mentioned in the course of my contribution, Deputy McNamara, I believe is an ideal opportunity for people to link into that fora, to bring those matters through the fora to the attention of the Minister of State, John Perry, and also to the Minister for Health.